Presidential power. If you think of the presidents who have been powerful and influential and who have demonstrated leadership, you probably will come up with the names of Washington, Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Reagan, and Bush. Even though Nixon resigned in disgrace as a result of the Watergate affair and Bush was not re-elected, all the presidents listed dominated the national scene because of the perceived leadership during times of national emergencies, war and economic hardship, or domestic development. These leadership attributes can be categorized as the ability to manage a crisis, the ability to demonstrate leadership as perceived by the public, the ability to appoint quality officials, the ability to set and clarify the national agenda, the ability to achieve a legislative agenda, and the ability to achieve success in the foreign policy arena. These presidential attributes have been also classified by James David Barber in the presidential character as active positive, active negative, positive passive, and passive negative. George Washington established the tenure of the institution. Virtually everything he did set precedent. The appointment of a cabinet, the establishment of a working relationship with Congress, and his warning to stay neutral in world affairs set the tone for the presidency for years. Even though as a populist president, Andrew Jackson has been recognized as making a positive contribution to the institution, it was not until Lincoln resolved the issues of state rights that the office really grew in power and influence. Theodore Roosevelt, with his square deal, the trust-busting policies of his administration, and his announcement that Latin America shall have a policy of walk softly but carry a big stick, brought the presidency to the forefront. Woodrow Wilson successfully piloted the country through the First World War, but did not succeed in obtaining a lasting peace. His failure to achieve Senate approval of the Versailles Treaty and the League of Nations weakened his overall performance. Without a doubt, the single most influential president during the 20th century was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. His New Deal policies and the mobilization of the country to fight the Axis powers during World War II created a dynamic presidency, some say the first imperial presidency. Kennedy's New Frontier and the manner in which he stood up to Russia during the Cuban Missile Crisis, as well as a public perception that he was creating change for the country, strengthened the institution. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs were compared to many Roosevelt's New Deal programs. The country became embroiled in the Vietnam War, and Johnson decided not to seek another term. Nixon's foreign policy accomplishments, the eventual ending of the Vietnam War, the détente with the Soviet Union, and the diplomatic recognition of China contributed to his presidency. Reagan and Bush have been credited with being catalysts in ending the Cold War. They were in office during the demise of the Soviet Union, and Bush's vision of a new world order put the presidency in the middle of crucial policy-making decisions. President Clinton's legacy includes a balanced budget agreement and the longest period of economic prosperity in United States history. As the nation's chief executive, the president must faithfully execute the laws of the nation. In doing so, the president has developed and organized the executive department into three areas: the cabinet, the executive office, and the White House staff. The administrative responsibilities of these departments increase the size and scope of the executive department as a whole. Through tradition, custom, and precedent, these presidential appointments have determined the nature of presidential administrations. The cabinet was instituted by George Washington. Every administration since Washington has had one. There have been unofficial advisors, such as Andrew Jackson's Kitchen Cabinet. Cabinet appointees need Senate confirmation and play an extremely influential role in government. There are currently 18 cabinet-level positions. Creation or abolition of these agencies needs congressional approval. There have been cabinet name changes, such as the change from Secretary of War to Secretary of Defense. Cabinet agencies have been created because national issues such as the environment, energy, and education are placed high on the national agenda. The cabinet has been expanded to include the Central Intelligence Agency Director, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, and the White House Chief of Staff. The Vice President is a sitting member of the Cabinet, too. Cabinet officials have come from all walks of life. They are lawyers, government officials, educators, and business executives. Many cabinet officials are friends and personal associates of the president. Only one, Robert Kennedy, was a relative of the president. That practice was stopped by law. Presidents have used cabinet officials in other capacities. Nixon used his attorney general as campaign manager. Cabinets are scrutinized by the American public to see whether they represent a cross-section of the population. It was only recently that full minority representation in the cabinet became a common practice. To put this issue in perspective, the first woman, Frances Hopkins, was appointed to the cabinet in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. Cabinet nominees have been turned down by the Senate. George Bush's appointment of Texas Senator John Tower was defeated by the Senate as a result of accusations that Tower was a womanizer, had drinking problems, and had potential conflict of interest problems with defense contractors. During his term, President Clinton had trouble gaining approval of cabinet appointees. Zoe Baird was nominated as the first woman attorney general. However, because of allegations that Baird hired an illegal alien as nanny, Clinton was forced to withdraw the nomination. The event became known as Nannygate. Issues facing a president are how much reliance should be placed on the cabinet, whether a cabinet should be permitted to offer differing points of view, and how frequently cabinet meetings should be held. Each cabinet member does administer a bureaucratic agency and is responsible for implementing policy within each area. The George W. Bush cabinet and staff appointments signaled that the president was serious about unifying the country after the close and divisive election of 2000. Former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Colin Powell was nominated as Secretary of State, the first time an African American was named to that post. Bush's National Secretary Advisor Condoleezza Rice, a Stafford University professor, was the first African American woman appointed to that post. A third African American, Rod Page, Superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, was named Secretary of Education. Mel Martinez was appointed Housing Secretary, and another Hispanic, Texas Supreme Court Justice Alberto Gonzalez, was named the White House Counsel. Women were also prominent appointees. New Jersey Governor Christie Whitman was named Director of Environmental Protection Agency, and former California Agricultural Director Ann Venneman was appointed Secretary of Agriculture. Elaine Chao, former Director of the Peace Corps, was named as Labor Secretary. Bush also relied heavily on personnel from his father and former President Ford's administration. The only Democrat named to Bush's cabinet was Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta, who was the first Asian American to serve as Commerce Secretary in President Clinton's cabinet. Three controversial appointments ran into opposition. Former Colorado Attorney General Gail Norton was named Secretary of the Interior, even though environmental groups opposed her nomination. Linda Chavez, the former executive director of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, was originally nominated as Secretary of Labor, but withdrew under pressure after failing to divulge the fact that she had employed an illegal alien in her home for 2 years. Former Senator John Ashcroft was nominated as Attorney General and was opposed by civil rights and pro-choice organizations. Ashcroft had to endure tough confirmation hearings before being confirmed by the Senate. Separate from the cabinet is the executive office of the president. It was created by Franklin Roosevelt in 1939. Today it has 4 major policy-making bodies: the National Security Council, the Council of Economic Advisors, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Office of National Drug Control Policy. The National Security Council, chaired by the President, is the lead advisory board in the area of national and international security. The other members of the Council include the Vice President and Secretaries of State and Defense, as well as the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The President's National Security Advisor is the direct liaison. Even though the function of the Council is advisory, under President Reagan it conducted the Iran-Contra operations, which attempted to obtain hostages for arms. It was the mismanagement of this operation that resulted in the accusations that the President violated congressional acts prohibiting aid to the Nicaraguan Contras. The Council of Economic Advisors consists of individuals who are recognized as leading economists. They are approved by the Senate and help the President prepare the annual economic report to Congress. This report outlines the economic state of the Union. The largest agency in the executive office is the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Its director, appointed with the consent of the Senate, is responsible for the preparation of the massive federal budget, which must be submitted to Congress in January each year. Besides formulating the budget, the OMB oversees congressional appropriations. It is a key agency because it has tremendous policy-making ability based on its budget recommendations. The department is also the President's direct link to other agencies and helps prepare executive orders and presidential budget policy. The Office of National Drug Control Policy is a recent addition to the Executive Office. It is chaired by a director appointed by the President with the consent of the Senate. The head of the agency has been dubbed the nation's drug czar. The responsibility of the agency is to prepare recommendations on how to combat the problem of drug abuse. It also coordinates the policies of other federal agencies in this area. Other departments that exist in the Executive Office are the Office of Policy Development, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the Council on Environmental Quality, the Office of Administration, and the Office of the United States Trade Representative. The Office of Homeland Security is the latest addition to the Executive Office. Created after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the Office of Homeland Security is responsible for protecting the United States against future attacks. Each agency is responsible directly to the President and makes policy recommendations appropriate to each area. The White House staff, managed by the White House Chief of Staff, directly advises the President on a daily basis. The Chief of Staff, according to some critics, has an inordinate amount of power, often controlling the personal schedule of the President. Nixon's Chief of Staff, H.R. Haldeman, kept a personal diary. It revealed the close relationship between the President and his Chief of Staff, as well as the influence the Chief of Staff plays in policy formation. Other staff include the more than 600 people who work at the White House, from the chef to the advanced people who make travel arrangements. The key staff departments include the political offices of the Office of Communications, Legislative Affairs, Political Affairs, and Intergovernmental Affairs. It includes the support services of scheduling, personnel, and Secret Service, and the policy offices of the National Security Affairs, Domestic Policy Affairs, and Cabinet Secretaries. Each plays an important role in formulating policy and making the White House run smoothly. The First Lady has her own office and a staff, as does the Vice President. The role of the nation's First Lady has been defined by each of the President's wives. Hillary Rodham Clinton was given the responsibility of chairing the Health Care Reform Task Force and moved from the traditional office in the White House reserved for the First Lady to the working wing of the White House where other White House staff members work. After the efforts to get a comprehensive health care bill failed, Mrs. Clinton took on a more traditional role as the country's First Lady. This role continued during Clinton's second administration. During the Whitewater investigation, Mrs. Clinton testified before a grand jury. Charges were not brought against her. Using the theme of her book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, Mrs. Clinton continued to be an advocate for children's causes. Mrs. Clinton has also become the only First Lady to seek elective office. She was elected to the Senate in 2000 by the voters of New York.